The Whispers Beneath Blackroot Hill. In the remote village of Eldergrove, nestled deep within a forest that even the wind seemed afraid to enter, there was a hill the locals avoided, Blackroot Hill. It stood cloaked in perpetual mist, its trees twisted unnaturally, their bark black as coal and roots like grasping fingers. No one climbed the hill after sunset. But when 13-year-old Elsie Wentworth vanished while picking wildflowers, and her voice was heard singing in the night, though she was never found, something ancient stirred beneath the soil. Years later, Isaac Marlow returned to Eldergrove. A historian obsessed with forgotten folklore, Isaac had read of the singing child, a tale the villagers refused to speak of aloud. He rented the old Holloway cottage near the edge of the woods, equipped only with a voice recorder, an oil lantern, and his grandfather's journal, its margins filled with cryptic notes, symbols, and the words, "The truth sleeps beneath Blackroot." One night, as fog rolled in thicker than usual and shadows danced against his windowpane, Isaac heard it, faint, melodic humming. It came from the trees, then from beneath the floorboards, and finally, from the hill. He followed the sound. Through thorned underbrush and past sleeping crows, he reached a hollow at the base of Blackroot Hill, where a crumbling stone arch marked the entrance to an old tunnel, sealed by rusted chains. Isaac lifted his recorder, pressing record. Then the chains fell away on their own. And from within the tunnel came a voice, not a child's, but a layered murmur, hundreds speaking at once, forming one haunting question. "Why have you come?" Isaac answered, "To find the truth." The voice replied, "Then hear what was buried." The recorder crackled violently, and a pale hand reached from the dark. Part 2. The Echoes Within. Isaac's breath caught in his throat as the pale hand withdrew into the tunnel, vanishing like mist into shadow. The recorder, still in his grip, now emitted faint whispers in reverse, his own voice, somehow distorted, speaking words he didn't remember saying. "The truth sleeps beneath Blackroot." He stepped through the archway. Inside, the tunnel opened into a hidden crypt, its walls etched with swirling symbols and faded carvings, eyes, mouths, and spiral roots that twisted into impossible shapes. A cold wind rushed past him, though there was no clear exit. Then Isaac saw them, mirrors. 11 tall, cracked mirrors stood in a circle, their frames blackened and warped. And in each mirror, a different child stood silent, unmoving. Their eyes, white as frost. Their mouths sealed shut. Among them was Elsie Wentworth. Isaac's heart raced. He raised the lantern, its dim light flickering against the mirrors. The children began to hum. Soft, disharmonious tones that bled into one another like a chant from another realm. In the center of the circle stood a stone pedestal, and atop it, a small, silver music box. Its lid was closed. Isaac approached and opened the recorder again. This time, it played a message not his own. "Open it, and you'll hear what never should be heard." Despite every warning, he reached for the music box and slowly turned the key. The melody was unlike any tune he'd ever heard. It wasn't just music, it was memory, woven into sound. He saw flashes, a funeral with no mourners, roots wrapped around a coffin, a girl singing beside a tree whose branches whispered her name. Then came the final vision, himself, standing at the base of Blackroot Hill, holding a child's hand, but the child had no face. The music box stopped. The mirrors shattered. And suddenly Isaac was alone, not in a crypt, but atop Blackroot Hill, the soil freshly turned. His lantern was gone. His recorder buried at his feet. The village lights glowed faintly in the distance, untouched by fog. But something had followed him back. A voice, soft and childish, whispered beside his ear. "Now you know. Now you stay." Part 3: The Rooted Past. Isaac didn't sleep. Since the hill returned him, the village no longer felt like Eldergrove. The streets were the same, but faces seemed older. Homes had flickered gas lamps instead of electric lights. And nobody recognized the name Elsie Wentworth. His grandfather's journal had grown heavier, as if its ink soaked in something alive. A new entry appeared on the first page. "You've unlocked memory. Now unlock time." That night, Isaac sat at Holloway Cottage, turning the recorder in his hands. It was silent until exactly midnight. Then it spoke. "Go to the tree. The one that never dies." He knew the one. It stood at the far edge of Blackroot Hill, gnarled and massive, with roots exposed like veins in stone. Folklore called it the Ever-root, a tree older than the village, rumored to bleed sap the color of rust and whisper names to the wind. Isaac returned to the hill under a sky blank with stars. As he approached the tree, the ground softened beneath him, giving way to a shallow pit. Within it lay a single item, a child's music box, identical to the one in the crypt. Only this one was open, and playing on its own. He turned off the recorder. And yet, voices whispered. They whispered names, people he never knew. Dates stretching back centuries. One phrase repeated between them all. "We were buried without memory." Suddenly, the bark of Ever-root peeled away, revealing photographs. Hundreds of them. Sepia-toned faces of children, each one faded, each one scratched out at the eyes. In the center of the tree's hollow, a name was carved. Isaac Marlow. Then the whispers stopped. He stumbled backward, eyes locked on the tree, as something began to emerge, a silhouette, slowly taking shape from the trunk itself. Its face was flickering between dozens of children's features. Its voice was a chord of the lost. "You are the last living memory. You woke us." Isaac tried to speak, but his voice was gone. The ground quaked slightly. Roots slithered above the soil, moving toward his feet. Then came the final sentence, spoken not by the creature, but by the recorder, now floating midair. "Memory is a gift. But it is also a debt." Part 4: The Hollow Memory. Isaac awoke lying on the cold wooden floor of Holloway Cottage. Rain lashed against the windows, yet no storm had been forecast. The lantern beside him was glowing faintly, not with fire, but with something pale and unnatural. The recorder sat upright on the table, though he hadn't touched it. It played a new message. "You must return what you took." Isaac didn't understand. He hadn't taken anything, only knowledge. Only memory. But in his coat pocket, something pulsed. He reached inside and withdrew the music box. It was different now, blackened with soot, engraved with symbols that hadn't been there before. The melody it played was slower, deeper, like time itself was unraveling within each note. He tried to close the lid, but it wouldn't shut. Outside, the trees around Blackroot Hill were swaying against no wind. Their roots quivered in the soil. The villagers had gone silent, their homes dark. The fog wasn't just gathering now. It was pressing inward, crawling through cracks and thresholds. Isaac stepped outside, drawn to the base of the hill once more. There, he found new graves. Shallow ones, their markers etched not with names, but with moments. The first breath. The forgotten wish. The night you heard the whisper. And one grave stood open. It bore the words, "The last memory, Isaac Marlow." He dropped the music box into the grave, and the earth swallowed it whole. The fog thickened instantly. A circle formed around him, children's silhouettes visible within it. Their eyes now clear, their mouths softly smiling. Elsie stood among them, holding the lantern from his cottage. She spoke, not aloud, but in his mind. "We are memory. And memory needs a keeper." Isaac understood. This wasn't a haunting, it was a transfer. The crypt, the mirrors, the voices, it had all been a ritual to pass down what was nearly lost. The stories of children erased by time, tragedies too painful to be remembered, buried beneath generations of silence. Isaac knelt. The lantern dimmed. The children faded. And the recorder, untouched, played one final line. To remember is to remain. To forget is to disappear. Isaac Marlow was never seen again in Eldergrove. But sometimes, in the quiet fog beneath Blackroot Hill, when no birds sing and the trees lean too far to listen, there comes a sound. A soft melody. A music box. Still playing. Part 5. The Keeper's Lantern. Weeks passed, though Isaac no longer measured time by clocks. His world existed between flickers, moments when the veil grew thin and memories not his own came whispering. He wandered Eldergrove like a ghost, and the villagers barely noticed. Or perhaps they, too, had begun to forget. Holloway Cottage remained untouched except for one change. The lantern, once ordinary, now glowed faintly every night with no fuel. It pulsed when stories were near. Isaac understood now, he wasn't just remembering. He was collecting. The village had lost its keepers. So Isaac listened. In the church, he found hymns no longer sung. One verse echoed through the rafters. Where roots run deep, the soul may speak, but truth must never rise. In the apothecary, behind a shelf of dust-covered jars, he discovered letters written to children who'd never aged. Messages from parents begging forgiveness, hoping someone would remember them when time forgot. Isaac read each one aloud into the recorder. And each time he did, the fog thickened briefly, and voices came to life, not as hauntings but as echoes seeking refuge. At last, the lantern flickered with something new, not pale light, but blue. It pulsed once. Then twice. Then remained still. Isaac knew it was calling him. That night, he returned to Blackroot Hill not as a seeker, but as a keeper. The everroot tree stood unchanged, silent and sprawling. Yet beneath it, a new hollow had opened, a library of memory. Shelves lined with music boxes, each carved with names and dates, wrapped in moss and time. He placed the recorder on the central altar. The moment he did, all the boxes opened. And the hill sang. Thousands of voices, children, elders, wanderers, wove together into a choral lament, not of sorrow but of remembrance. Isaac didn't flinch. He stood among them, lantern raised, light steady. The fog pulled inward, gathering into a single form, a boy, neither living nor gone. His eyes were clear, his voice like wind through reeds. "Will you stay and remember for us?" Isaac nodded. And slowly, his form dimmed. He was no longer flesh, nor shadow, but something in between. A keeper. The boy stepped back into the fog. The lantern burned brighter. From that day forward, Eldergrove changed. Children began to dream of voices singing in the mist. The hill grew quiet, but not empty. And if one listened closely, beneath the roots of Blackroot Hill, they'd hear a man's voice, steady, patient, telling stories never told aloud. Isaac had become what memory asked of him. A lantern in the dark.